If corporations are pushed out of housing, prices don't magically become affordable. Something else breaks first. Liquidity disappears, sellers freeze, and entire neighborhoods get repriced overnight. This isn't about politics, it's about who wins, who gets trapped, and why most homeowners are completely unprepared for the fallout. Let's see what we can do about it. So, for those that have missed the major news today, this is an article from CNBC. It says Trump says the U.S. is to ban large investors from buying homes. Yeah, this has been something that has been on many people's minds. It's been something that many people believe is keeping them out of the housing market. Let's see what he said. So today, Donald Trump posted on Truth Social that the American dream is increasingly out of reach for far too many people, especially younger Americans. It is for that reason and much more that I am immediately taking steps to ban large institutional investors from buying more single-family homes. And I will be calling on Congress to codify it. People live in homes, not corporations. Well, if that isn't a quote that you think most people could get behind, I'll say that again. People live in homes, not corporations. That sounds like something that many, many Americans would agree with, a sentiment that many would agree with. And again, this is an article from CNBC. Unfortunately, the rest of the article lacks in my opinion, very significant and important stats. So we're talking about single-family homes that are being bought up by institutional investors like BlackRock. And they buy these homes and then they rent them out. They manage basically real estate companies and they rent these homes out. But how many single family homes are currently held as rentals in the United States? The figures that I was able to pull say about 15 million homes. So then that begs the next question. How many of these homes are truly held by these large institutional investors? We're not talking about mom and pop situations where they set up an LLC, buy a single family home and rent it out. We're talking about companies that might buy up thousands, or even tens of thousands of these homes and manage them as rentals. Well, the estimates are between 2 and 4%. Now that's 2 and 4% of the 15 million. So roughly 500,000 homes is what we're actually talking about. Now, keep in mind, there's tens of millions of homes in America. So we're only talking about 500,000 homes out of tens of millions of homes. And so right there, that may tell you that the impact of this may not be as big as you think, but it could impact you in some ways, and I'm going to get to that. So those are the actual numbers that we're working with. 15 million homes, single-family homes that are held as rentals, 500,000 of which are deemed to be held by these larger institutional investors. And the question becomes, will they sell? Well, if you listen very closely to the quote that I read, or if you read what Donald Trump posted, he says that he is going to try to stop companies from buying more single-family homes. He did not say that he's going to make them all immediately divest themselves of the single-family homes. I think there's a lot of people online that heard this announcement and they read it a little too quickly and they misread it entirely. They think that there are going to be millions of homes because they're lacking the context, and articles like this one from CNBC don't provide the full context. They're viewing this as millions of homes will suddenly be put up for sale at an affordable price. And I'm telling you, that is not the case, at least in the short term. We're talking about 500,000 homes that might not be put up for sale at all. But that'll be the question, whether these companies sell, because their business is supposedly going to be capped if Congress listens and passes a bill of this nature. But I think the big problem, which also is probably not going to be talked about, is that many Americans are deceived into thinking that a home is the way to build wealth. Far and above, just it being part of the American dream, they think it's their golden ticket. And if they don't have a home, they're going to be held back financially forever. And that is because two reasons. Homes in America have traditionally been one, a store of value, and two, a forced savings mechanism. And I'll explain both. So one, a store of value. If you look at real estate prices, on average, historically, for the last several decades, they tend to not go down in value. The prices tend to not go down. When they do, it might be very, hyper-local situations where there's been overbuildup. And of course, the great financial crisis, when home prices on average across the country everywhere went down. Some markets, that were overbuilt, more affected than others, but on average, everything went down. But aside from that case, or maybe some hyperlocal cases, homes typically do not go down. So therefore, it represents a store of value. By buying a home, by increasing your equity in a home, the idea is that that money is safe. And so people think, okay, well, my money is safe there and home prices will go up and therefore I'll become wealthy. So that's one reason. The other reason is that it's a forced savings mechanism. And why is a forced savings mechanism useful? It's because Americans are historically awful at saving money and especially awful at investing money. And I don't mean the quality of the investments or the quality of the savings accounts. I mean, they're just awful at actually doing it. And this isn't because of inflation recently. This is how it's been for many, many years. This is not a new phenomenon. I saw an article from MarketWatch that says almost 60% of Americans are living paycheck to paycheck. They are just not putting any money away. And many of them will say, well, that's the current economic conditions. I hear you and I understand. And I believe that inflation is making things worse for many, many people and making it harder to save. But also understand that those stats are not new. They are not surprising. If you look back over several decades, people just flat out don't save money, even when everyday living was objectively more affordable. So the home is in general put on a pedestal, and it's because the values typically don't go down and it's a forced savings mechanism. So if you have someone that's really awful at saving, but they buy a home, by having to pay down their mortgage, part of their mortgage payment goes to interest payments to the bank. The other part of the mortgage payment goes to pay down the loan balance and thereby building up their own equity in the home. So it's making this person who might be horrible at saving, it's making them save money. And it's making them save money in a spot that typically won't go down. And so that's why many people view this as a great wealth creator, when in reality, they're even better wealth creators. If you look at just the S&P 500's performance over the last many, many decades, it will crush home value performance. The S&P 500 would have done much, much better. And so where this can unravel, where it can impact you, is if you are a homeowner right now and these institutional investors decide to start selling these properties, it could create short-term disruptions. It could hurt the store of value that you thought your home was when 500,000 units of inventory flood the market. Do I think that's all going to happen at once? No. But is it always a possibility? Of course. And we'll have no idea when or if that'll happen, because first we'll have to see what Congress does, and then we'll have to see how these institutional investors react to that. And so what am I doing in this case? Well, I'm looking at this and making sure I keep my frame of reference right, and that I'm not looking at my home as my primary wealth building opportunity. I know that there are far better opportunities out there to build wealth. I'm focusing on those. I'm treating a primary home for what it is. It is a place where I can live, I can feel comfortable, I can put roots down in a community and meet my neighbors, and I can try and make it more comfortable and not worry about a landlord. But at the end of the day, that's what it is. It's part of living out the American dream. While it does act as a default investment for many people, because most people are awful at saving and investing, it is really not the best option. So when I hear that home prices might be affected, I'm not too worried, because I'm not focusing on my home as a primary investment. That's our takeaway. Have a good night.